Take it off right now. The watch repairman didn't look at the delicate gears of the Patek Philippe my son had given me. He looked at my wrist with pure terror in his eyes. He didn't use a screwdriver. He used a pair of tongs and threw the watch into a lead-lined box he kept under the counter. The metal clanged shut, and he backed away, breathing hard. I stood there, confused, rubbing the red, irritated skin where the watch had sat for the last week. That was the moment my life as a father ended, and my life as a ghost began. My son Bennett didn't give me a timepiece for my 70th birthday. He gave me a slow, ticking execution. Before I tell you how I survived my own murder and the hell I rained down on the people who did this, let me know in the comments where you are watching from. If you have ever had to cut a toxic family member out of your life to survive, hit that like button. 5 a.m. My knees hit the cold tile of the bathroom floor again. The bile burned my throat, but there was nothing left in my stomach to expel. I gripped the porcelain bowl, my knuckles white, my body shaking with a violent tremor that felt like it was coming from my very marrow. I spat, wiping my mouth with the back of my hand, and saw a clump of gray hair stuck to my wet skin. I pulled it. It came away without any pain, as if my scalp had simply decided to give up. Another clump was on my pillow. I was 70 years old, yes, but 2 weeks ago I was chopping wood in the backyard of my modest farmhouse. I was strong. I was Atticus Thorne, the man who had built a global shipping empire with his bare hands before selling it all for $600 million and disappearing into a quiet, simple life. Now, I couldn't even stand up without the room spinning. I crawled back to bed, my eyes landing on the nightstand. There it was. The Patek Philippe. It gleamed under the street lamp outside, a masterpiece of Swiss engineering. Bennett had given it to me 7 days ago at my birthday dinner. I remembered his tears. Real, wet tears streaming down his face as he held my hand across the table at the diner. "Dad," he had said, his voice cracking. "I know we haven't always seen eye to eye. I know I've made mistakes. But you are my hero. You are all I have." Beside him, his wife Serena had wiped her eyes with a napkin, though I noticed her eyes were dry and she kept checking her phone under the table. I was touched. For the first time in years, I thought my son finally saw me, not as a bank, but as his father. I put the watch on immediately. I hadn't taken it off since. I reached for it now, fastening the heavy gold band around my wrist. It felt warm, strangely warm. The skin underneath was red and itchy, a rash that wouldn't go away. I ignored it. I had a doctor's appointment in an hour. Dr. Evans would know what to do. He had been our family doctor for 20 years. He delivered my grandson Leo. I trusted him. I trusted. The drive to the clinic was a nightmare. The road seemed to tilt. My old Ford truck, a relic I kept to maintain the illusion of my limited pension, felt like it was floating. I parked crookedly and stumbled into the office. Dr. Evans didn't even run blood tests. He didn't check my heart rate. He sat across from me, tapping his pen on his clipboard, avoiding my gaze. "Atticus," he said, his voice flat, "we have to be realistic. You are 70. Your body is just slowing down. It is natural degeneration. I have prescribed some strong sedatives. You need to sleep. You need to rest." "But I am losing my hair, Evans," I snapped, slamming my hand on the desk. The impact sent a shockwave of pain up my arm. "I am vomiting blood. This isn't aging. This is sickness." "It is stress, Atticus," he insisted, finally looking at me. His eyes were glassy, fearful. He looked like a man with a gun pointed at his back. "Go home. Take the pills. Make your peace, make my peace." The words rang in my ears as I walked back to the truck. He was telling me I was dying without telling me I was dying. I felt a surge of rage. I wasn't ready to die. I had a 10-year-old grandson, Leo, who needed me. I turned the key in the ignition, my vision blurring. Black spots danced in front of my eyes. I pulled out onto the main road, the mid-morning sun blinding me. Suddenly, my left arm, the arm with the watch, went completely numb. It jerked on the steering wheel. The truck swerved into the oncoming lane. A horn blared. A massive semi-truck was barreling toward me. I slammed on the brakes, the tires screaming against the asphalt, and spun the wheel with my good hand. The truck skidded off the road, crashing through a wooden fence and coming to a halt in a cloud of dust. I sat there, gasping for air, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I was alive. I looked down at my wrist. The impact had smashed the crystal face of the Patek Philippe against the steering column. The second hand had stopped moving. The beautiful gift was broken. I needed to fix it. I couldn't let Bennett know I had broken his symbol of love so quickly. I reversed the truck, shaking, and drove toward the only place I knew that handled high-end repairs without asking questions. O'Malley's antique shop on the edge of town. The shop smelled of dust and old oil. Clocks of every size ticked out of sync, a chaotic rhythm that usually calmed me. Today, it felt like a countdown. O'Malley was in the back, a man who looked like he was carved from oak, wearing a jeweler's loupe. He had been a military engineer before he fixed clocks. He knew machines better than he knew people. "O'Malley," I called out, my voice raspy. "I need a favor." I smashed the crystal. He looked up, squinting. "Atticus? You look like death warmed over." "I feel like it," I grunted, unclasping the watch and sliding it across the glass counter. "Can you replace the glass?" "My son gave it to me." O'Malley picked it up. He frowned. He brought it closer to his eye, adjusting his loupe. Then he stopped. He didn't open the back case. He just held it, his hand trembling slightly. He looked at the back of the watch, then at me, then at the watch again. His face went pale, draining of all color. "Where did you get this?" he whispered. "I told you." "Bennett. For my birthday." O'Malley didn't respond. He turned around and grabbed a bulky, yellow device from a shelf. A Geiger counter. I hadn't seen one since the Cold War documentaries. He turned it on. The machine instantly began to scream. A rapid, high-pitched crackling sound that filled the small shop. Click, 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 click. The needle buried itself in the red zone. O'Malley dropped the device and used a pair of long tongs to grab the watch. He threw it into a lead box and slammed the lid. The clicking stopped. The silence that followed was heavier than the lead box. "Take off your shirt," O'Malley commanded. "What? Take it off!" I unbuttoned my flannel shirt. My left wrist was a mess of blistered red skin. The rash spiraled up my forearm, tracing the veins. "It's radiation burns," O'Malley said, his voice shaking. "That wasn't a watch movement inside, Atticus. There is no balance wheel. There is no mainspring. Inside that case is a high-grade industrial isotope, cobalt-60 or maybe cesium. It was shielded just enough so it wouldn't kill you instantly, but the shielding on the back, the part touching your skin, was filed down. It's been beaming ionizing radiation directly into your bloodstream for a week." I stared at the lead box. My brain couldn't process the words. Radiation. Bennett. My son. "He is poisoning me?" I whispered. "He is nuking you," O'Malley corrected, walking around the counter to lock the front door. He flipped the sign to closed. "If you had worn that for another week, your organs would have liquefied. As it is, your bone marrow is probably cooking. That is why you are sick. That is why your hair is falling out. It's acute radiation syndrome." I collapsed onto a stool. The nausea returned, violent and sharp. It wasn't just the radiation. It was the realization. Bennett crying at dinner. "You are all I have, Dad." He was crying because he was murdering me. He was crying because he was acting. "Call the police," O'Malley said, reaching for the landline. "No," I said. The word came out as a growl. I stood up, swaying. "No police." "Atticus, he tried to kill you. If I call the police, he gets a lawyer. He gets bail. He claims it was an accident. That he bought a fake watch online and didn't know. He walks away. Or worse, he goes to prison, and I never know why. I never know who helped him. A radiation source like that isn't something you buy at Walmart. He has help." I thought of Dr. Evans. "It is just stress, Atticus." He knew. He had to know. The symptoms were textbook. Bennett had gotten to him too. This wasn't a crime of passion. This was a conspiracy. "I need a phone," I said. "Not the police. I need Victoria." Victoria Graves, the Iron Lady. She had been my corporate counsel for 30 years. She was the only person on earth who knew I wasn't a poor pensioner living in a farmhouse. She knew about the $600 million sitting in offshore trusts. She knew where the bodies were buried because she had brought the shovels. I dialed her private line. She answered on the first ring. "Atticus? You sound terrible." "I'm dying, Victoria," I said, my voice cold as the grave. "My son is murdering me with a radioactive watch." There was a pause, a silence that would have broken a lesser attorney. Victoria didn't gasp. She didn't ask if I was sure. She simply shifted gears. "Are you safe right now?" "I am at O'Malley's. The watch is in a lead box. Good. Listen to me. Do not go to the hospital yet. If Bennett has compromised your GP, he has monitors in the hospital system. If you check in for radiation poisoning, he will know he failed. He will finish the job another way." "What do I do?" "You die, Atticus. You die exactly the way he wants you to." I looked at O'Malley. He was watching me with a mixture of fear and respect. "O'Malley," I said, covering the mouthpiece, "do you have any of those replica watches? The empty shells you use for parts?" He nodded. "I have a cheap knockoff that looks exactly like that Patek. I use the case for display." "Good. Put it on a strap." I spoke back into the phone. "Victoria, prepare the paperwork. I want everything ready. The blind trusts, the liquidation protocols, the private investigators. I want to know who Bennett owes money to. I want to know why he is in such a rush." "I'm on it," she said. "But Atticus, be careful. If you go back there, you are walking into a lion's den." "I am not the prey, Victoria," I said, looking at my burnt wrist. "I am the hunter." I hung up. O'Malley handed me the fake watch. It was light, cheap, harmless. I strapped it over my burned skin. The pain was excruciating, a reminder of the betrayal. I gritted my teeth and buttoned my sleeve. I drove home. The sun was setting, casting long, bloody shadows across the fields. When I pulled into my driveway, I saw a familiar black Mercedes parked next to the porch. Bennett and Serena. They were here. They weren't waiting for a phone call telling them I was dead. They were here to watch it happen. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. I looked pale, sweaty, sick. Perfect. I stumbled out of the truck, dragging my feet. The front door opened before I could reach it. Bennett stood there. He wasn't smiling. He looked tense, impatient. Serena was behind him, her arms crossed, tapping her foot. "Dad," Bennett said, not moving to help me as I tripped on the bottom step. We were worried. You weren't answering your phone. I felt dizzy, son, I wheezed, leaning heavily on the railing. I had to pull over. Dr. Evans gave me some pills. Serena stepped forward. Her eyes darted immediately to my left wrist. She saw the gold band peeking out from my cuff. Her shoulders relaxed. She smirked. You should be resting, Atticus, she said, her voice dripping with fake concern. You really shouldn't be driving in your condition. We need to talk, Dad, Bennett said, ushering me inside. It's important. They led me to the kitchen table. They didn't offer me water. They didn't ask if I needed food. Bennett pulled a thick blue folder from his briefcase. He slammed it on the table. Dad, Dr. Evans called us, Bennett lied. He said your condition is deteriorating faster than expected. He says your memory is going to start failing. You're going to get confused. I slumped in the chair, letting my head hang low. I am so tired, Bennett. I know, Dad. That's why we need to handle things for you. We don't want you worrying about bills or the farm. He opened the folder. It was a durable power of attorney. It gave Bennett full, unrestricted control over all my assets, my medical decisions, and my estate. It was a license to steal everything and pull the plug on my life whenever he chose. Just sign here, Dad, Bennett said, uncapping a pen and shoving it into my hand. It's just so we can pay the electric bill if you get sick. Serena was hovering over my shoulder. Her perfume was overpowering, masking the scent of my own fear. Sign it, Atticus, she said, her voice sharp, before you forget your own name. I looked at the paper. The letters swam before my eyes, partly from the radiation, partly from the sheer audacity of their greed. They thought I was a senile old man with a small pension and a farm. They didn't know they were trying to hijack a fortune that could buy this entire county. My hand trembled. I let the pen shake violently. I can't read it well, I stammered. You don't need to read it, Bennett snapped, losing his patience. I told you what it is. Just sign the damn line. I pressed the pen to the paper. I started to write. A TTICUS. Then I let my hand slip. I jerked the pen. Instead of writing Thorn, I scribbled a jagged, illegible line that looked vaguely like home. It wasn't my signature. Legally, it was gibberish. I dropped the pen. I can't. I'm so weak. Bennett snatched the paper. He looked at the scribble. It was close enough for a corrupt bank manager, maybe. He grinned. A predatory, hungry grin. That's good enough, Dad. That's perfect. He looked at Serena. She nodded. They had what they wanted. They thought they owned me. They thought I was a dying animal they had finally cornered. You should go to bed, Dad, Bennett said, closing the folder. We'll show ourselves out. We have a lot of work to do. I watched them leave. I watched them walk to their Mercedes, laughing. Bennett high-fived Serena. They drove away, thinking they had just won the lottery. I sat in the dark kitchen, the silence of the house pressing in on me. I unclasped the fake watch and threw it on the table. My wrist was throbbing, the skin peeling. I picked up my phone and dialed Victoria again. They took the bait, I said. Good, Victoria replied. I just got the report on Bennett's finances. Atticus, you need to sit down. I am sitting. Tell me. Bennett doesn't just have credit card debt. He owes $15 million. I gasped. 15 million? How? Gambling, crypto, bad real estate deals. But that's not the worst part. His creditor isn't a bank. It's a man named Silas Vane. They call him the Butcher. I knew the name. Everyone in the shipping industry knew the Butcher. He didn't sue you when you didn't pay. He dismantled you. Victoria continued. Bennett promised Vane he would pay him back in full in 30 days. He put up collateral. What collateral? I asked, though I felt the answer coming like a cold wind. You, Atticus. He showed Vane your old financial records he found in the attic. He knows you have the life insurance policy worth $50 million that you set up years ago for the estate taxes. Bennett promised Vane he would have that payout within the month. I closed my eyes. It wasn't just greed. It was desperation. My son had sold my life to a monster to save his own skin. He had put a radioactive gun to my head because he was too weak to face his own mistakes. 30 days, I whispered. He has 10 days left, Atticus, Victoria said. That's why the radiation. He needs it to look like a natural illness before the deadline. If you aren't dead by the 25th of this month, the butcher comes for Bennett. And if I am dead, then Bennett gets the $50 million, pays the butcher, and keeps the change. I looked at the fake watch on the table. I looked at the signature I had faked. He wants a death, I said softly. I will give him a death, but it won't be mine. Victoria, initiate Protocol Lazarus. Protocol Lazarus? It was a contingency plan I had made years ago, back when I was swimming with sharks in the business world. A plan to fake my death and disappear if my enemies ever got too close. I never thought I would use it against my own flesh and blood. Atticus, are you sure? Victoria asked. Bennett brought the butcher into our family, I said, standing up, ignoring the pain in my joints. I'm going to introduce them. I hung up. The nausea rolled over me again, but this time I welcomed it. It was fuel. I walked to the bathroom and looked at the dying man in the mirror. I needed to look worse. I needed to look like I was at death's door. Tomorrow, Bennett would come back to check on his investment. He would find his father fading away. He would call his friends. He would start celebrating. Let him celebrate. Let him spend the money he doesn't have yet. Because when the clock strikes 12, he isn't going to find a pot of gold. He is going to find out what happens when you try to bury a man who is still holding the shovel. The game had just begun. And I had the one thing Bennett didn't have. I had time. And I was going to use every second of it to destroy him. My arm throbbed with a rhythmic burning pulse that seemed to sync with the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. I sat in my study, the heavy velvet curtains drawn tight against the morning sun. Darkness was my only comfort now. The fake watch sat on the mahogany desk in front of me, a cheap piece of plastic and glass that looked identical to the weapon my son had strapped to my wrist. I stared at it, waiting. I wasn't waiting for death anymore. I was waiting for answers. The sound of tires crushing gravel outside broke the silence. I didn't move to the window. I knew who it was. Victoria Graves didn't knock. She had a key, a relic from the days when she managed hostile takeovers for my shipping empire at 3 a.m. She walked into the study, tossing her soaking wet trench coat onto the leather sofa. She looked immaculate, as always, her silver hair pulled back in a severe bun that screamed authority. But her face was different today. Usually Victoria wore a mask of stone. Today, she looked like she had seen a ghost. She didn't say hello, she didn't ask how I was feeling. She walked straight to my desk and dropped a thick black file in front of me. The sound it made hitting the wood was heavy, like a coffin lid slamming shut. "Read it," she said, her voice devoid of its usual professional calm. I opened the file with my good hand. The first page was a bank statement. Not mine. Bennett's. It was a sea of red ink. Overdrafts, loans, margin calls. I flipped the page. Gambling debts in Las Vegas. $3 million lost in a single weekend at the baccarat tables. I flipped again. Crypto investments. Another $4 million vanished into thin air when a digital coin collapsed. I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. My son wasn't just bad with money. He was a catastrophic failure. It gets worse, Victoria said, pouring herself a drink from the decanter on the shelf. She didn't offer me one. She knew my liver was already fighting a losing battle against the radiation. Keep reading. I turned to the next section. It was a dossier on a shell company called Chimera Holdings. I scanned the list of directors. They were all fake names, straw men. But then I saw the signatory on the loan agreement. Bennett Thorne. And the lender. Silas Vane. The air left my lungs. I dropped the paper. I knew that name. God help me, I knew that name better than I knew the names of my own neighbors. The butcher, I whispered. Victoria nodded, taking a long sip of scotch. The butcher. Bennett didn't borrow from a bank, Atticus. He borrowed from the man who runs the docks in Jersey. The man who dissolves problems in acid baths. My mind flashed back 30 years. I was building my shipping company, Thorne Logistics. Silas Vane had tried to muscle in on my unions. We had a war. A quiet, bloody war fought in the shadows of shipping containers and union halls. I won, but only because I was more ruthless than he expected. Vane never forgave me. He had sworn that one day he would take everything I built. Bennett borrowed $15 million from my worst enemy, I said, the realization settling over me like a shroud. 15 million, Victoria corrected, with 20% monthly interest. Bennett hasn't made a payment in 4 months. Vane is squeezing him. He threatened to take Bennett's wife. He threatened to take your grandson, Leo. Leo. My innocent, 10-year-old grandson, rage, hot and blinding, flared in my chest, momentarily dulling the pain in my arm. Bennett had exposed my grandson to a monster. But Vane doesn't lend money on promises, Victoria, I said, my voice shaking. You know that. I know that. Vane requires collateral, hard assets, real estate, ships. Bennett has nothing. He rents his house, he leases his car. What did he give Vane? Victoria walked around the desk. She placed her hand on my shoulder. It was the first time in 30 years she had touched me with anything other than a handshake. Turn the page, Atticus. I turned the page. It was a copy of a life insurance policy. My policy. The one I had taken out 20 years ago to cover estate taxes so the business wouldn't have to be sold when I died. Face value, $50 million. And underneath it was a document I had never seen before. An assignment of benefits. It was signed by Bennett Thorne. He pledged the payout, Victoria said softly. He told Vane that he is the sole beneficiary of your estate. He signed a contract guaranteeing Vane the full $50 million the moment you die. I stared at my son's signature. It was shaky, desperate. There is a clause, Victoria continued, pointing to a highlighted paragraph at the bottom. Read the date. I squinted. The letters were blurry. Payment due in full by October 25th. That is 10 days from now, I said. Exactly. Bennett didn't just borrow money, Atticus. He sold a futures contract on your life. He promised Silas Vane that you would be dead by October 25th. If you are alive on the 26th, the deal is void, and Vane comes for Bennett. He comes for the debt. He comes for Leo. I leaned back, closing my eyes. The radiation sickness surged, a wave of nausea that made the room spin. It all made sense. The watch, the timing, the desperation. Bennett wasn't just greedy, he was terrified. He was a rat caught in a trap, and he had decided the only way to chew his leg free was to kill his father. He is trying to beat the deadline, I whispered. That is why the isotope. It's slow, but it mimics natural organ failure. If I die of radiation poisoning, it looks like cancer or old age to a paid-off doctor. He collects the $50 million. He pays Vane. He keeps the rest. And Vane gets the ultimate revenge. He gets my money, and he gets to watch my son kill me to get it. It is the perfect crime, Victoria said. Except for one thing. You didn't die. Not yet, I muttered. Victoria sat on the edge of the desk. We have options, Atticus. We can go to the FBI. We can give them Vane. We can put Bennett in witness protection. I laughed, a dry, rasping sound that hurt my throat. Witness protection? For the man who put a nuclear reactor on my wrist? Number Bennett made his choice. He chose Vane over me. He chose money over his own son's safety. Then what do we do? Victoria asked. Bennett will be back. He will check on you. When he sees you aren't dying fast enough, he will panic. He will try something else. A pillow over the face. A fall down the stairs. Let him try, I said, opening my eyes, while I felt a cold clarity wash over me. The pain was still there, but it was distant now. It was fuel. I looked at the file again. $15 million. That was the noose around Bennett's neck. And Silas Vane was the hangman. Victoria, I said, standing up, I want you to set up a meeting. With who? The police? No. With Silas Vane. Victoria stood up, her eyes wide. You can't be serious. Vane will kill you on sight. Vane is a businessman, I said, buttoning my jacket over my bandaged arm. He wants his $15 million. Bennett can't pay him unless I die. But I can pay him. Atticus, you are not going to pay off your son's debt. After he tried to kill you? I'm not paying it off, I said, a cruel smile touching my lips. I'm going to buy it. Victoria froze. You want to buy the debt? I want to own the paper, Victoria. I want to be the one Silas Vane answers to. I want to be the one holding the leash when Bennett realizes his master has changed. But Vane hates you. He loves money more than he hates me. Set it up. Tell him I have a proposition. Tell him I can give him something better than $15 million. Tell him I can give him the one thing he has wanted for 30 years. What is that? The satisfaction of watching the Thorne legacy destroy itself. Victoria stared at me for a long moment. Then, slowly, she nodded. She picked up her coat. You are playing a dangerous game, Atticus. You are sick. You are weak. I am not weak, Victoria. I looked at the fake watch on the table. I just needed to know what time it was. And now I know. It is time to teach my son a lesson. She walked to the door. I will make the call. But Atticus, there is one more thing you need to know. What? I had my investigator tail Bennett after he left your house yesterday. He didn't go home. He went to a warehouse district. He met with someone. Vane? No. Your grandson. Leo. My heart stopped. What? Bennett took Leo to the warehouse. He left him there with a nanny. But it wasn't a nanny, Atticus. It was one of Vane's enforcers. Bennett has already handed over the boy. Leo is the insurance policy. If Bennett doesn't pay by the 25th, Vane keeps the boy. The room went black for a second. The rage I felt before was a candle. This was a forest fire. Bennett had pawned his own son. He had given my grandson to the butcher as a deposit. Get out, I said, my voice trembling with a violence I hadn't felt since the war. Make the call. Get me Vane. Victoria ran out the door. I stood alone in the dark study. I looked at my reflection in the window. I looked old. I looked dying. Good. That was exactly what they needed to see. I walked to the safe behind the painting on the wall. I spun the dial. Inside, Next to the stacks of cash and the deeds to the properties Bennett didn't know existed was a black velvet box. I opened it. Inside was a syringe and a small vial of clear liquid. Adrenaline. Pure, concentrated adrenaline. I wasn't going to die in a hospital bed. I wasn't going to die with a pillow over my face. I was going to get my grandson back. And then, I was going to burn Bennett's world to the ground, ash by ash. I closed the safe. The game had changed. It wasn't about money anymore. It wasn't about the watch. It was about Leo. And for Leo, I would become the monster Bennett thought I was. I would become the butcher's boss. I picked up the fake watch and strapped it back on. The pain was sharp, grounding. It was a reminder. Every time it hurt, I would remember why I was doing this. I walked out of the study and into the night. The hunt was on. The iron gates of the rented villa in the hills swung open with a slow, pretentious groan. It was a monstrosity of glass and steel, a house that screamed new money, or rather, the desperate illusion of it. I parked my rusted Ford truck next to Bennett's leased Mercedes. The contrast was deliberate. The dying pauper visiting the thriving prince. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror one last time. I had rubbed a little gray ash under my eyes to deepen the hollows. I looked like a man with one foot in the grave. I touched the fake watch on my wrist. The skin beneath was raw and blistering from the real one. A constant, throbbing reminder of why I was here. I wasn't here to eat. I was here to inspect the battlefield. Bennett met me at the door. He was wearing a velvet smoking jacket, holding a glass of scotch. He looked the part of the grieving son preparing for a windfall. He hugged me and I felt his body tense. He was checking for the watch. He wanted to feel the metal against my skin. He wanted to make sure the poison was still flowing. "Glad you could make it, Dad," he said, pulling back with a smile that showed too many teeth. "We wanted to have a nice family dinner. Just us. While you are still feeling up to it." I shuffled inside, leaning heavily on my cane. The house smelled of expensive lilies, funeral flowers. Subtle, Bennett. Very subtle. Serena was in the dining room, arranging place settings. She didn't look up. She was too busy calculating how much my life insurance payout would cover of their debt to the butcher. "Where is Leo?" I asked, my voice trembling just enough to sell the act. "I brought him a peppermint." Bennett exchanged a quick, sharp look with Serena. "Leo is upstairs," Serena said, smoothing her silk dress. "He is being punished." "Punished?" I asked, sinking into the chair at the head of the table. "What for?" "Grades," Bennett lied smoothly, pouring me a glass of wine I had no intention of drinking. "He failed math. We told him he has to stay in his room and study. No distractions. No dinner until he learns the value of hard work." The value of hard work. The irony was so thick I could taste it. My son, who had gambled away $15 million and mortgaged his own father's life to a loan shark, was lecturing a 10-year-old on hard work. I nodded slowly, playing the part of the disappointed grandfather. "A shame," I muttered. "I wanted to see him." "Maybe later, Dad," Bennett said, dismissing the subject. "Now let's eat." I ordered Wagyu beef. "Only the best for you." The dinner was a grotesque theater of the absurd. Bennett cut into steaks that cost more than my truck, talking with his mouth full about projects that didn't exist. He spun tales of a solar farm in Nevada, a tech startup in Silicon Valley, a merger in Tokyo. I listened, nodding, while my internal ledger tallied every lie. I knew for a fact he didn't own a solar farm. I owned the land he was talking about. I had bought it through a shell company 10 years ago. He was trying to sell me a fantasy to explain where the money would go once I died. "It is going to be huge, Dad," Bennett said, waving his fork. Once the capital clears, once the inheritance settles, once the business liquidity improves, we are going to be set for life. I am going to buy you a better room at the facility. The facility? He was already moving me out. That sounds wonderful, son, I wheezed, pushing the meat around my plate. I am just glad you are doing so well. I was worried. About money. Serena laughed, a brittle, glass-breaking sound. Money? Oh, Atticus, we are swimming in it. We just have some temporary cash flow restrictions. But everything is lined up. Everything is going according to plan. She looked at my wrist again. She was checking the time. Not the hour, but my time left on Earth. I need to use the restroom, I said, pushing my chair back. The steak it is not sitting well. Bennett jumped up. Let me help you, Dad. No, I snapped, perhaps a little too forcefully. I regained my composure. I can manage. I know the way. I shuffled out of the dining room, dragging my left leg. I waited until I was out of their sight line, around the corner of the grand staircase. Then, I straightened my back. The pain in my wrist was screaming, but the adrenaline silenced it. I didn't go to the guest bathroom. I took off my shoes, carrying them in my hand, and moved up the carpeted stairs like a shadow. I knew which room was Leo's. It was the one at the end of the hall, the one with the heavy bolt lock on the outside. A lock on a child's bedroom door. That wasn't for punishment. That was for containment. I slid the bolt back. It was well-oiled, silent. I pushed the door open. The room was dark, the curtains drawn tight. It smelled of stale air and fear. Leo? I whispered. A small shape moved in the corner, huddled on a mattress on the floor. There was no bed frame, no desk, no toys. The shelves were bare. The closet was open and empty. My grandson, my 10-year-old boy, was sitting cross-legged in the dark, holding a piece of dry bread. Grandpa? He whispered, his voice tiny, terrified. You aren't supposed to be here. Mommy said if I talk to you, they will sell my bike. I closed the door softly behind me and knelt on the floor. The rage I had felt downstairs was nothing compared to the cold, black hatred that filled me now. They had stripped his room. They had sold everything. Leo, look at me, I said, taking his face in my hands. Where are your things? Where are your toys? They sold them, Leo sobbed, tears cutting tracks through the dust on his cheeks. Daddy said we needed the money. He said the bad men were coming. He said we had to sell everything until you die. My heart stopped. Until I die. What did he say, Leo? He said when Grandpa goes to sleep forever. The money comes, Leo cried, clutching the crust of bread like it was gold. He said we just have to wait. He said I have to be quiet and eat the bread because dinner costs too much. He said you are sick and it is taking too long. I pulled him into my chest. I hugged him so hard I was afraid I might break him. They were starving him. They were psychologically torturing a child, making him wait for my death like it was Christmas morning. They had turned me into a villain in his eyes, a roadblock to his happiness, and yet, he was still hugging me. I am not going to die, Leo, I whispered fiercely into his ear. Do you hear me? I am not going to die. But Daddy said, Daddy is wrong. Daddy is in trouble. I pulled back. I reached into my jacket pocket. I didn't have food. I wished I had brought the steak, but I had something else. I pulled out a thin black card. It wasn't a credit card. It was a matte black metal card with a single phone number embossed in gold on the front and a magnetic strip on the back. It was my emergency line, the direct line to my private security team, a group of ex-Mossad agents I kept on retainer for situations exactly like this. Leo, listen to me very carefully, I said, pressing the card into his small hand. Hide this. Put it in your sock, under the mattress, somewhere they will never look. Do not show it to your mom or dad. What is it? It is a magic card, I lied. If things get bad, if the bad men come to the house, or if your dad tries to take you somewhere you don't want to go, I want you to find a phone. Any phone. Call the number on this card. Can you do that? Who do I call? You just call. Someone will answer. You tell them your name is Leo Thorne and your code word is Lazarus. Say it. Lazarus. Good. If you say that word, men will come. Good men. They will take you to my farm. They will keep you safe. Do you understand? Leo nodded, his eyes wide. He tucked the card deep inside his sock, pulling the fabric up high. Grandpa, are you going to be okay? You look sick. Your face is gray. I am acting, Leo, I whispered, winking at him. It is a game. I am pretending. But you have to pretend too. You have to pretend I am sick. You have to pretend you are hungry. Can you do that for me? Can you be a spy? Leo wiped his nose. A spy? Like in the movies? Exactly. We are going to trick them. But you have to be brave. I kissed his forehead. I wanted to take him. I wanted to throw him over my shoulder and run out of that house. But I knew the security system. I knew the cameras. And I knew about the black sedan parked down the street. The butcher had eyes on the house. If I took Leo now, they would intercept us before I reached the highway. I needed to destroy the threat first. I needed to cut the head off the snake. I stood up, my knees cracking. I smoothed my hair. I put the mask of the dying man back on. I have to go back down, I said. Finish your bread. Stay strong, Leo. I am coming back for you, I promise. I slipped out of the room, sliding the bolt back into place. It felt like locking my own heart in a cage. I walked back down the stairs, putting my shoes on at the bottom. When I re-entered the dining room, Bennett was pouring another drink. He looked up, his eyes glassy. Everything okay, Dad? You were gone a long time. Just confused, I mumbled, leaning on the doorframe. I got lost in the hallway. I forgot which door was the bathroom. Bennett exchanged a smirk with Serena. The senility narrative was working. Sit down, Dad, Serena said. Have some dessert. I sat. I watched them eat. I watched them drink. I watched them celebrate the death of the man sitting right in front of them. They were vultures, picking at a carcass that was still breathing. But they didn't know the carcass was poisoned. They didn't know that by trying to eat me, they were swallowing their own destruction. I looked at the fake watch on my wrist. Tick, tick, tick. The deadline was coming, but not for me. I finished the dinner. I let Bennett walk me to the truck. I let him fake a hug. Drive safe, Dad, he said. Call us if, well, just call us. I will, son, I said. I will call you very soon. I drove away. I didn't go home. I drove to the storage unit where I kept the old files. The files on Silas Vane. The files on the shipping wars. I had a meeting to prepare for. Bennett had invited the butcher to dinner. It was only polite that I introduced myself as the chef. I touched the burning skin on my wrist. The pain was sharp, focusing. It reminded me of Leo in the dark. It reminded me of the dry bread. Bennett Thorne was going to pay. He wasn't just going to lose his money. He wasn't just going to lose his freedom. He was going to lose the luxury of ignorance. I was going to show him exactly who his father was. And then, I was going to show him what happens when you cross a man who has nothing left to lose but the one thing you tried to steal. I pulled out my phone and dialed Victoria. "Did you set it up?" I asked. "Vane is expecting you," she said. "Midnight. The docks. Warehouse 4. "Perfect," I said. "Atticus, he is going to kill you." "No, Victoria," I said, watching the city lights blur into streaks of fire. "He is going to try. But he doesn't know I am already dead." I hung up. I turned the truck toward the ocean. The smell of salt water filled the cab. It smelled like the past. It smelled like war. I was ready. The floor tasted like iron and dust. I had fallen. I didn't remember falling, but my cheek was pressed against the cold hardwood of my hallway, and my legs refused to move. The room spun in lazy, nauseating circles. This wasn't part of the act. This was the receipt for the week I had spent wearing that radioactive shackle. My body was revolting. My gums throbbed with a dull ache, and when I coughed, a fine mist of blood speckled the floorboards. I tried to push myself up, but my arms felt like they were filled with wet sand. I reached for the phone I had knocked off the table. I didn't dial 911. I dialed Bennett. I didn't speak when he answered. I just let out a low, ragged groan and let the phone slide from my fingers. I needed him here. I needed him to think he was winning. If he thought nature was taking its course, he might get careless. But I had underestimated the toll the radiation had already taken. As the darkness crept in at the edges of my vision, I realized I might not have to pretend much longer. I woke up to the smell of leather and expensive cologne. I was moving. The vibration of a car engine hummed against my back. I opened my eyes a slit. I was in the back seat of Bennett's Mercedes. He was driving fast, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. He kept glancing in the rearview mirror, not at me, but at the traffic behind him, as if he were running from something. "Dad, can you hear me?" he asked, his voice tight. "Hospital," I croaked. "Need hospital. I am taking you to the best, Dad." "Don't worry. A specialist. He knows exactly what to do." I looked out the window. We passed the exit for the county hospital. We passed the exit for the University Medical Center. We were heading out of the city, toward the wooded hills, where the estates hid behind high walls. "Where?" I whispered. "Sanctuary Hills," he said. "It is private. You need privacy." I knew Sanctuary Hills. It wasn't a hospital. It was a holding tank for the wealthy and unwanted. A place where rich families stashed their inconvenient elders to fade away quietly. Bennett wasn't taking me to get saved. He was taking me to be discarded. We pulled through a wrought iron gate. 2 orderlies were waiting. They didn't look like nurses. They looked like bouncers in scrubs. They lifted me onto a gurney with practiced, rough efficiency. I tried to protest, to raise my hand, but Bennett grabbed it. He squeezed my wrist, right over the burn. "Just relax, Dad," he hissed. "Let them take care of you." They wheeled me into a room that looked more like a hotel suite than a medical facility. Beige walls, heavy curtains, a television playing muted news. But there was an IV stand and a heart monitor that beeped with a slow, erratic rhythm. My rhythm. A man entered. He wasn't wearing a white coat. He wore a sharp Italian suit and a stethoscope that looked like a prop. Dr. Kincaid. I recognized him from the society pages. The doctor who wrote prescriptions for bored housewives and covered up overdoses for senators. "He is fading in and out," Bennett said, pacing the room. "He collapsed at the farm." Kincaid shone a light in my eyes. I let them roll back. I let my jaw go slack. "His vitals are weak," Kincaid said, checking the monitor. The organ failure is progressing. Whatever he was exposed to, it is doing the job. I need a timeline, Bennett snapped. Kincaid sighed. Hard to say. A week, maybe 2. Ideally, his kidneys will shut down first, then the heart. It will be peaceful. I don't have 2 weeks, Bennett shouted. The sudden noise made me flinch, but I held my breath. I need him gone by the 25th. Do you understand? The 25th is the deadline. I lay there, a statue of flesh and bone, listening to my son negotiate the date of my execution. The 25th. 3 days from now. That was when the debt to the butcher came due. Kincaid lowered his voice. Bennett, we have to be careful. If we rush it, it looks suspicious. An autopsy could... There won't be an autopsy, Bennett interrupted. I have power of attorney. I control the body. I want him cremated immediately. Just speed it up. There was a pause. The sound of liquid being drawn into a syringe. I can up the sedative, Kincaid said softly. Morphine and a beta blocker. It will depress his respiratory system. His heart is already struggling. If we slow it down enough, it will just stop. He will go to sleep and not wake up. Do it, Bennett said. Do it now. I felt the prick of a needle in my IV line. Cold fluid rushed up my arm. That should take the edge off, Kincaid said, and it will weaken the heart muscle. By tomorrow night, he should be critical. By the 25th, he will be a memory. Bennett let out a breath, a sound of immense relief. Thank you, doctor. When the insurance clears, you will get your bonus. Just make sure the check clears, Bennett. I don't work for IOUS. They walked toward the door. Bennett stopped at the foot of the bed. I felt his gaze on me. It wasn't sorrow. It wasn't regret. It was calculation. He was looking at a winning lottery ticket. Goodbye, Dad, he whispered. You had a good run. The door clicked shut. The lock turned. I opened my eyes. The room swam. The drugs were fast. My limbs felt heavy, detached, as if they were floating in deep water. The monitor beeped slower. Beep, beep. They were killing me. Not with radiation anymore. With chemistry. I couldn't stay here. If I fell asleep now, I would never wake up. The butcher wouldn't get his money. Bennett would get his inheritance. And Leo, my God, Leo, he was still locked in that room. He was waiting for a grandfather who was about to die in a beige room in the middle of nowhere. No. I bit my tongue. Hard. The sharp copper taste of blood flooded my mouth. The pain cut through the fog of the morphine. Focus. Atticus. Focus. I sat up. The room tilted violently. I grabbed the bedrail to steady myself. I looked at the IV bag hanging above me. A clear bag of death. I reached up with my good hand. My fingers felt thick, clumsy. I clawed at the tape on my arm. I ripped it free, taking hair and skin with it. I pulled the needle out. Blood sprayed onto the white sheets, bright and red. Good. I was still bleeding. I was still alive. I swung my legs over the edge of the bed. My feet hit the floor, and my knees buckled. I caught myself on the nightstand, knocking over a pitcher of water. It crashed, the glass shattering. I froze. I waited for footsteps, for the orderlies. Silence. The room was soundproof. Of course it was. They didn't want the screams of the dying to disturb the other guests. I shuffled to the window. I pushed the heavy curtains aside. It was locked, a key lock on the handle. I looked around the room. Nothing sharp, nothing metal. Then I saw the shattered water pitcher on the floor. I picked up a large shard of thick glass. My hand was shaking so badly I almost dropped it. I jammed the glass into the gap between the window frame and the lock. I twisted. The glass bit into the wood. I pushed harder, putting my entire weight into it, ignoring the pain in my chest, ignoring the black spots dancing in my vision. Crack! The wood splintered. The lock gave way. I pushed the window up. The night air hit me like a slap, cold and smelling of pine. I looked down. Second floor. Below me was a manicured garden, shadowy and quiet. A wooden trellis, covered in ivy, ran down the side of the wall. It was a young man's escape route. I was a 70-year-old man full of poison and sedatives. I climbed onto the sill. The wind whipped my hospital gown. I looked at the drop. If I fell, I broke a hip. If I stayed, I lost my soul. I grabbed the trellis. The wood groaned under my weight. I swung my legs out. My muscles screamed. The rough bark tore at my palms. I lowered myself, foot by foot, gasping for air. The trellis shook. A vine snapped, whipping my face. I slipped. My foot scrambled for purchase, finding a knot in the wood. I hung there for a second, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs, waiting for the wood to snap, waiting to fall. It held. I reached the ground. I collapsed into the damp earth, burying my face in the dirt. I smelled mulch and fertilizer. It was the best thing I had ever smelled. It smelled like life. I dragged myself up. I couldn't go to the main gate. There would be cameras, guards. I moved toward the tree line, sticking to the shadows. I was barefoot. The stones cut my feet. The brambles tore at my legs. I didn't care. I reached the woods. I kept walking until the lights of the clinic were just aglow behind me. I found a service road. I started walking, one foot in front of the other. I wasn't Atticus Thorne, the shipping magnate. I wasn't Atticus Thorne, the victim. I was a ghost, and ghosts don't stop. A pair of headlights cut through the darkness ahead. An old pickup truck coming down the service road. I stepped into the light, waving my arms. The truck slowed. It stopped. An old man in a baseball cap rolled down the window. He looked at my hospital gown, my bleeding arm, my bare feet. "Mister, you okay? You look like you went through a meat grinder." I leaned against the warm metal of his door. I looked him in the eye. "I need a phone," I rasped, "and I need a ride to the city. I can pay you. I can pay you more than this truck is worth." He hesitated. Then he unlocked the door. "Get in." I climbed in. The cab smelled of tobacco and stale coffee. I leaned my head back against the seat. I was out. But I wasn't done. I borrowed his phone. My fingers left bloody prints on the screen as I dialed. "Victoria? Atticus? My God, where are you?" Bennett called me. "He said you were in critical condition. He said to prepare the will." "Bennett is premature," I whispered, watching the trees blur past. I checked myself out. "Atticus, you sound—" "I am alive, Victoria. That is all that matters." "Did you set the meeting?" "Yes. Tonight. Midnight. Warehouse 4. Vane is waiting. He thinks you are coming to beg." I looked at the digital clock on the dashboard. 10 p.m. 2 hours. "I'm not coming to beg," I said, the adrenaline burning away the morphine fog. "I'm coming to close a deal." I hung up. I looked at the driver. "Drive fast," I said. "I have an appointment with a butcher." The warehouse district smelled of rust and low tide, a graveyard of industry where the city hid its mistakes. The old pickup truck idled at the curb, and I thanked the driver with the last $100 bill in my wallet. He didn't ask questions, he just nodded at my bloody hospital gown, and drove away into the fog. I stood before the corrugated steel door of O'Malley's workshop, shivering as the night air bit into my exposed skin. I banged my fist against the metal 3 times a rhythm we had agreed upon years ago. The door rattled and rose just enough for a pair of boots to appear. O'Malley slid a shotgun barrel through the gap before he saw my face. When he recognized the wreck of a man standing in the dirt, he threw the door open and dragged me inside. The workshop was warm, filled with the comforting ticking of 1,000 clocks, but tonight there was a different energy. O'Malley didn't offer me a chair. He practically carried me to a workbench in the back, where the lead box sat under a harsh halogen light. "You look like you crawled out of a grave." O'Malley grunted, grabbing a first aid kit from the wall. He started cleaning the gash on my arm where I had ripped out the IV, pouring alcohol over the wound, without warning. I hissed through my teeth, but the pain was grounding. It kept the morphine fog at bay. "I need to know, O'Malley," I rasped, pointing at the lead box with my good hand. "Where did it come from? Who sold a nuclear weapon to my idiot son?" O'Malley stopped bandaging my arm. He looked at me with a grim expression, wiping his hands on a rag. He walked over to a computer monitor cluttered with schematics and grainy photos. It wasn't a weapon, Atticus, not originally. "I stripped the casing down while you were gone. I found a serial number etched on the inner shielding. It was microscopic, but it was there." He pulled up an image on the screen. It looked like a massive piece of industrial machinery, a metal donut large enough to fit a car. "This is an industrial radiography unit," O'Malley explained. "It is used to check for cracks in oil pipelines and ship hulls. It uses a high-activity source of iridium-192, or cobalt-60. This specific machine was reported stolen from a salvage yard in New Jersey 3 months ago." "New Jersey," I whispered. "The butcher's territory." "Exactly," O'Malley said. "But Silas Vane deals in loans and violence. He doesn't fence radioactive waste. That takes a specialist. Someone who knows how to extract the core without melting their own face off." I made some calls. I tapped into the old network. He clicked a key and a mugshot appeared on the screen. The man in the photo was younger, maybe 40, with slicked back hair and a jawline that looked like it had been broken and reset a few times. He was wearing an orange jumpsuit in the photo, but I recognized the eyes. They were cold, predatory eyes. "I know him," I said, my blood turning to ice. "That is Dante, Serena's brother." O'Malley nodded. "Dante Moretti, also known as Dante the Ghost. He isn't an investment banker like your daughter-in-law claims. He is a high-end fence. He specializes in stolen medical equipment and hazardous materials. He did 5 years in federal prison for selling counterfeit cancer drugs to hospices." The room spun. I grabbed the edge of the workbench to steady myself. Serena had told us Dante was a venture capitalist in Monaco. She said he missed the wedding because of a merger. She said her family was old money from the East Coast steel magnates who valued privacy. It was all a lie. "Serena isn't old money," I whispered, the realization hitting me harder than the pavement outside the hospital. "She isn't a socialite. She is a grifter," Atticus O'Malley said brutally. "I ran her prints off a glass she touched the last time she came in here with Bennett. Her name isn't Serena Vanderhost. It is Sarah Moretti. Her father wasn't a steel magnate, he was a confidence man who died in Attica. Her mother ran a fake charity scam in Florida. They are a family of vipers, Atticus. They target weak, wealthy men and strip them to the bone." I sank onto a stool. It wasn't just Bennett's greed. He had been targeted. He had been groomed. Serena had found the weak link in the Thorne dynasty, the son who always felt inadequate, the son who wanted to be a big shot without doing the work. She had wound him up like a toy soldier and pointed him at his own father. She brought the debt. She brought the brother with the radioactive poison. She was the architect. "Bennett is just the weapon," I said, my voice trembling with rage. "Serena is the hand pulling the trigger, and now they think they have won." O'Malley said, "They think you are dying in a hospital bed. They are probably popping champagne right now, waiting for the call. I looked at the lead box. I looked at the fake watch on my wrist. They wanted a death. They wanted an inheritance. They wanted the Thorn Empire to crumble so they could pick the gold from the rubble. I am not going to hide, O'Malley, I said, standing up. The pain in my body was still there, but it was distant now, overshadowed by a cold clarity. I am done running. Protocol Lazarus is too slow. Disappearing lets them win. It lets them take the money and run before the truth comes out. What are you going to do? O'Malley asked, eyeing the shotgun leaning against the wall. I am going to give them exactly what they want, I said. A dark smile spreading across my face. They want me dead. They want the will read. They want the money. Atticus, you are in no condition to fight them. I am not going to fight them with fists, I said, walking toward the door. I am going to fight them with theater. I am going to host a party, O'Malley. A very special party. A party? A living funeral, I said. I am going to tell Victoria to call Bennett. She will tell him I am fading fast. She will tell him that in a moment of clarity, I demanded to see everyone one last time. I want to say goodbye. I want to read the will while I can still speak. O'Malley stared at me. You are going to invite them into a room with you. You are going to let them think they won. I am going to gather them all in one place, I said. Bennett, Serena, the butcher. I want them all in the front row. I want them to look me in the eye when I sign the papers. And then what? And then I am going to show them what is inside the watch. I opened the door to the warehouse, looking out at the city skyline. Somewhere in those lights, Bennett and Serena were sleeping soundly, dreaming of millions. They didn't know the nightmare was awake. Call Victoria, I told O'Malley. Tell her to book the ballroom at the Grand Hotel. Tell her to hire the best makeup artist in the city. I need to look like a corpse who is still breathing. Tomorrow night, the Thorn dynasty ends, but I am going to make sure I am the one holding the matches. The ink on the document was still wet black and glistening like fresh tar. I stared at the words typed on the heavy cream-colored legal paper. Last Will and Testament of Atticus Thorn. It was a masterpiece of fiction. A lie worth $600 million. Victoria sat across from me in her office, her hands folded on top of the mahogany desk. She looked at the document, then at me with an expression that was equal parts admiration and terror. Are you sure about this clause, Atticus? She asked, tapping the final paragraph with a manicured fingernail. This is theatrical, even for you. It has to be theatrical, Victoria. I rasped my voice, still rough from the days of silence and smoke. Bennett is a narcissist. He doesn't just want the money. He wants the victory lap. He wants to stand in front of the city's elite and be crowned the new king. If I just left him the money in a quiet room, he would be suspicious. But if I give him a stage, he will walk right onto the trapdoor. I looked at the specific clause she was pointing to. It was simple. I leave my entire estate, including all liquid assets, real estate holdings, and the controlling interest in Thorn Logistics to my son Bennett Thorn on the condition that he accepts and wears my most personal possession as a symbol of the burden of leadership. He thinks it is just a ceremonial gesture, I said, a cold smile touching my lips. He thinks I am going to give him a ring or a medal. He doesn't know the possession is the watch. The very watch he used to try and kill me. Victoria sighed and picked up the phone. She dialed Bennett's number and put it on speaker. I leaned back in the shadows, my heart pounding a slow, heavy rhythm. This was the first test. Bennett, she said, her voice dropping into a somber, professional tone. This is Victoria Graves. Victoria Bennett answered immediately. He sounded breathless, anxious. Has there been a development? Your father is currently in a moment of lucidity, Bennett, but he is fading fast. The doctors say it is a matter of 24 hours. His heart is failing. There was a pause on the other end, a silence that screamed of relief. I could practically hear him smiling. "Oh God, that is terrible," Bennett said, his voice trembling with fake grief. "Poor Dad. Is he in pain?" "He is comfortable," Victoria lied smoothly. "But he is adamant, Bennett. He refuses to pass away without settling his affairs. He wants to see you. He wants to see everyone. He has ordered us to organize a farewell gathering tomorrow night at the Grand Hotel. He wants to read the will publicly. He says he wants to look you in the eye and hand over the empire before he takes his last breath." "A public reading?" Bennett asked. "Is that necessary?" "He is so sick." "It is the only way he will sign the final transfer papers," Victoria said. "He is stubborn, Bennett. You know that. If we don't do this, he might die intestate. The courts would tie up the assets for years. The probate alone would take a decade." "No," Bennett shouted too quickly. "No, we can't have that. Dad would want certainty. Of course. A farewell party. It is a beautiful idea. I will let Serena know. We will be there." "Good. 8 p.m. The ballroom. Invite who you want, Bennett. Your father said he wants witnesses. He wants the people who matter to see this." "I will invite everyone," Bennett promised. "Everyone." Victoria hung up. We sat in silence for a moment. "He took the bait," I said. "He swallowed it whole," Victoria replied. "Now comes the hard part," I said, standing up. "I need to get ready. I need to look like a man who has 24 hours to live." I didn't go back to the warehouse. I stayed in the guest suite of Victoria's office. I spent the next few hours coordinating with O'Malley. He was setting up the technical side of the presentation. We needed screens. We needed audio. We needed the Geiger counter hooked up to a PA system. It had to be undeniable. By late afternoon, the reports from my private investigator started rolling in. They were sickening. They were perfect. Bennett and Serena hadn't wasted a second. The moment they hung up with Victoria, they had gone on a spending spree that defied logic. It was the behavior of people who believed they had just won the lottery and were immune to consequences. The report showed Serena at the most exclusive dealership in the city. She didn't just look. She put a deposit down on a custom Aston Martin. A deposit she paid with a high-interest credit card that was already maxed out. She screamed at the salesperson, telling him that by Monday, she would own the dealership. She was already spending my blood money. But Bennett's movements were even more damning. The investigator tracked him to a private club downtown, the kind of place where business is done in back rooms filled with cigar smoke. He met with a man, a massive man with scars on his knuckles and a suit that cost more than my house. Silas Vane, the butcher. I looked at the photos the investigator had snapped with a long-range lens. Bennett was laughing. He was shaking Vane's hand. He was showing him something on his phone, probably the email from Victoria confirming the event. I could almost hear the conversation. "I told you, Silas. The old man is checking out. The money is yours tomorrow night. Come to the party. Watch me get the keys to the kingdom." Bennett was inviting his executioner to the front row. He wanted Vane to sass that he was good for the debt. He wanted to prove he was a player. He didn't realize he was just the main course. At 6 p.m., the makeup artist arrived. She was a woman who usually worked on movie sets creating monsters and zombies. I told her I didn't want a monster. I wanted a tragedy. "Make me look like my liver has failed," I told her, sitting in the chair. "Make me look like my blood is turning to poison." She worked for 2 hours. She applied layers of yellow-tinted foundation to my skin, simulating advanced jaundice. She contoured my cheeks to make them look sunken, hollowed out. She used a special adhesive to make my lips look cracked and dry. She darkened the circles under my eyes until I looked like a skull wrapped in parchment. When she was done, I looked in the mirror and frightened myself. The man staring back wasn't Atticus Thorne. He was a husk, a dying king waiting for the end. It was convincing. It was terrifying. Victoria walked in and gasped. "My God, Atticus." "It works, then?" I asked, my voice naturally raspy now from the fatigue. "It works," she said, handing me a cane. "Bennett won't suspect a thing. He will see exactly what he wants to see." I took the cane. I felt the weight of the moment pressing down on me. This wasn't just a performance. This was the end of my line. Tonight I would lose my son forever. Even if he went to prison, he was dead to me. The boy I had taught to fish, the boy I had carried on my shoulders, was gone. He had been replaced by this creature who poisoned his own father and sold his own son. "Is the security team in place?" I asked. "They are at the hotel," Victoria confirmed. "And they have a team at Bennett's house. They are watching the windows. The moment the signal is given, they will go in for Leo." "And Vane?" "He RSVP'd. He is coming with 2 bodyguards. He thinks he is there to collect." I adjusted my collar. I checked the fake watch on my wrist. It looked innocent enough. Just a piece of gold and glass. But tonight, it was going to be the hammer of judgment. "Let's go, Victoria," I said, walking toward the elevator. "It is time to die." The ride to the Grand Hotel was silent. The city lights blurred past the window streaks of gold and red. I thought about Serena. I thought about her brother Dante, the fence who sold the poison. He was already in custody, singing like a canary to the FBI, thanks to the evidence O'Malley and I had provided. But Serena didn't know that yet. She thought she was the queen of the board. We pulled up to the service entrance of the hotel. I wasn't going to walk in the front door. I needed to make an entrance. I sat in a wheelchair Victoria had arranged. She placed a blanket over my legs. I slumped down, letting my head loll to the side. "Showtime," she whispered, pushing me toward the freight elevator. We went up to the ballroom level. I could hear the murmur of the crowd through the heavy double doors. Bennett had done his job well. The room sounded full. He had invited the world to witness his triumph. Victoria stopped the wheelchair behind the heavy velvet curtains of the stage. I could see through a small gap. The ballroom was magnificent. Crystal chandeliers, tables laden with champagne and caviar. Bennett stood in the center of the room wearing a tuxedo, holding a glass of scotch. He looked radiant. He was laughing, clapping men on the back, accepting premature condolences, with a solemn nod that switched instantly to a grin when he turned away. Serena was beside him, wearing a dress that looked like it was made of diamonds. She was glowing. She held court like she had been born to it, not like the grifter she was. And there in the front row, sitting at a reserved table, was Silas Vane, the butcher. He sat still, watching Bennett with cold, reptile eyes. He wasn't drinking. He was waiting. The lights dimmed. A spotlight hit the stage. The room went quiet. Victoria stepped out from behind the curtain. She walked to the microphone, her heels clicking on the hardwood. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, her voice amplifying through the hall. "Thank you for coming on such short notice. As you know, Atticus Thorne is a man who has always done things his own way. Tonight is no exception. He wanted to say goodbye to you all in person." A murmur went through the crowd. "Please welcome Atticus Thorne." Victoria came back and wheeled me out. The spotlight hit me. I heard the collective gasp of the room. I looked hideous. I looked broken. I let my head hang low, my hand trembling on the armrest of the wheelchair. I saw Bennett's face in the front row. His eyes went wide, then narrowed. He was scanning me. He was looking for the sickness. He saw the yellow skin. He saw the sunken eyes. He smiled. A tiny, almost imperceptible smile. He thought he had won. He thought the radiation had done its job perfectly. I reached for the microphone with a shaking hand. I let it rattle against the stand. Thank you, I wheezed, my voice amplified, a broken rattle. Thank you all. I looked at Bennett. Come here, son, I whispered. Come stand by your father. Bennett jumped up onto the stage. He took my hand. His palm was sweaty. I am here, Dad, he said loud enough for the room to hear. I am right here. I looked at him. I looked deep into his eyes. I saw the greed. I saw the nothingness where his soul should be. It is time, I said. Read the will, Bennett. Read it to them. Victoria handed him the document. The fake will. Bennett took it, his hands shaking with excitement. He stepped to the microphone. My father, he announced, his voice booming, has asked me to read his final wishes. He opened the folder. He scanned the first page. His eyes lit up. He read the list of assets, the bank accounts, the properties, the shipping fleet. The numbers were staggering. The crowd whispered in awe. They had no idea I was this rich. Bennett read faster, getting to the end. I leave my entire estate to my son, Bennett Thorne. He stopped. He looked up at the crowd, a look of pure triumph on his face. He had done it. He had beaten the clock. He had beaten me. But he hadn't read the condition. Keep reading, Bennett, I rasped. Read the last part. Bennett looked down. He frowned. He read the condition silently first, on the condition that he accepts and wears my most personal possession. He smiled. He thought it was a ring, a trinket. And the condition he read aloud is that I accept and wear his most personal possession as a symbol of leadership. He looked at me beaming. I accept, Dad. Of course I accept. Anything to honor you. I slowly, tragically lifted my left arm. I pulled back the sleeve of my jacket. The fake watch glinted in the spotlight. Then take this, I whispered. The watch you gave me. I want you to have it back. I want you to wear it. Bennett froze. His smile vanished. His eyes locked onto the watch. He knew what was inside. He knew it was a death sentence. He knew it was poison. Take it, I said, my voice getting stronger. Put it on Bennett. If you want the money, you have to wear the watch. He took a step back. The color drained from his face. The room was silent. They didn't understand. They just saw a son refusing a sentimental gift from his dying father. No, he stammered. I can't. It was a gift for you. I don't need it anymore, I said, pushing the wheelchair forward, standing up. I stood up straight. I dropped the blanket. I didn't look weak anymore. I looked angry. Put it on. Bennett backed away until he hit the podium. Why are you afraid, son? I shouted, my voice booming without the microphone. Is there something wrong with it? Is there something inside it? Bennett looked at the crowd. He looked at Silas Vane, who was now standing up, frowning. He looked at Serena, who was clutching her diamond dress, looking like she wanted to vomit. It is broken, Bennett lied, his voice cracking. I will get it fixed first. It isn't broken, or I said. I unclasped the watch. I held it out. It is ticking, Bennett. Just like your time. I signaled to the sound booth. Now. The massive screen behind me lit up. It wasn't a slideshow of memories. It was a video. A video of O'Malley in his workshop wearing protective gear opening the back of the Patek Philippe. The sound of the Geiger counter blasted through the speakers. Click, 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 click. The crowd screamed. On the screen, O'Malley held up the industrial isotope. This is cobalt-60, O'Malley's voice narrated. Enough radiation to kill a man in 2 weeks. It was hidden inside the watch Bennett Thorne gave his father. I ripped the fake watch off my wrist and threw it at Bennett's feet. It shattered. You tried to cook me from the inside out! I roared, tearing open my shirt to wipe the makeup off my face, revealing the sweat and the rage beneath. You mortgaged my life to a butcher, and you tried to murder me to pay the bill. Bennett looked at the screen, then at me, then at Vane. He realized the trap had snapped shut. He didn't run toward me. He ran toward the exit. But the doors were already blocked. Not by security. By the police. And standing right in front of them, holding the hand of a social worker, was Leo. My grandson pointed at his father. He locked me in the dark, Leo screamed. He said Grandpa had to die. Bennett fell to his knees. The party was over. The funeral had begun. But the body in the casket wasn't mine. The Grand Hotel ballroom smelled of lilies and desperation. 200 guests filled the space, a sea of black tuxedos and designer gowns moving like a tide under the crystal chandeliers. They were the city's elite, the sharks and the parasites, who had come to watch a titan fall. I sat in my wheelchair at the edge of the room, a blanket draped over my legs, my head lolling to the side. The makeup artist had done her work well. I caught a glimpse of myself in a mirrored pillar. I didn't look like Atticus Thorne, the shipping magnate. I looked like a corpse that had forgotten to stop breathing. My skin was yellow and waxy, my eyes sunken into dark, bruised sockets. I was the perfect image of a man whose organs were liquefying from the inside out. Bennett was in his element. He moved through the crowd with the grace of a predator who has just brought down a gazelle. He shook hands, he accepted premature condolences, with a solemn nod that instantly transformed into a greedy smile when he turned away. He was wearing a tuxedo that probably cost more than my first house. Beside him, Serena shimmered in a diamond-encrusted gown, looking every inch the grieving daughter-in-law, who was already spending the inheritance. But the most dangerous person in the room wasn't on the dance floor. He was sitting at a reserved table in the front row, nursing a glass of water. Silas Vane, the butcher. He sat like a stone idol surrounded by 2 bodyguards who bulged out of their suits. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't talking. He was watching Bennett with the cold, dead eyes of a man who is calculating interest rates on a human life. Bennett had invited his executioner to the front row to prove he was good for the debt. He wanted Vane to see the transfer of power. He wanted to show off his prize. Victoria stood behind my wheelchair, her hand resting protectively on my shoulder. She leaned down, her breath warm against my ear. "Everyone is here, Atticus," she whispered. "The board of directors, the bankers, even your old rivals from the union days." Bennett wanted a full house. "Good," I wheezed, my voice naturally raspy from the stress. "The more witnesses, the better." Bennett spotted us. He said something to Serena, then made his way through the crowd toward me. His face composed into a mask of tragic concern. He knelt beside my chair, taking my cold hand in his sweaty palm. "Dad," he said loud enough for the nearby guests to hear. "You made it. I am so glad. Everyone wanted to see you one last time." I looked at him through half-closed lids. I saw the adrenaline in his pupils. I saw the fear behind the bravado. "I wouldn't miss it, son," I rasped. "My party." "Let me get you something," Bennett said, snapping his fingers at a passing waiter. "Soup. Bring the lobster bisque. My father needs strength." The waiter hurried away. Bennett stayed by my side, stroking my hand. It took every ounce of my willpower not to recoil. His touch felt like slime. "It is almost over, Dad," he whispered, leaning close so only I could hear. "You are doing great. Just hold on a little longer. Then you can rest." Rest meant die. He was coaching me to the grave. The soup arrived. Bennett took the bowl and the spoon. He blew on the steaming liquid, making a show of it. He was playing the devoted son, feeding his invalid father. The crowd murmured in approval. "Look at him," they whispered. "Such a good son." taking care of the old man until the end. "Open up, Dad," Bennett said, bringing the spoon to my lips. I swallowed the soup. It tasted like ash. I forced myself to look grateful. I forced a weak, trembling smile. "Thank you," I whispered. "You are a good boy." Bennett beamed. He fed me another spoonful, then another. I watched his eyes dart toward the stage, toward the microphone. He was impatient. He wanted the main event. He wanted the paper in his hand. I signaled to Victoria. She nodded. "Ladies and gentlemen." Victoria's voice cut through the murmur of the room, amplified by the sound system. "If I could have your attention, please." The room went silent. The music stopped. 200 faces turned toward us. As you know, Victoria continued stepping up to the podium, her presence commanding the room. Atticus Thorne has always lived his life on his own terms. Tonight, as he prepares to say his final goodbyes, he has one last piece of business to conduct. He has asked to read his last will and testament publicly in the presence of his friends, his family, and his partners. A ripple of shock went through the crowd. Public readings were rare, theatrical. But then again, I was Atticus Thorne. I had built an empire on drama and steel. Bennett stood up, straightening his jacket. He looked at Vane. Vane gave him an almost imperceptible nod. The deal was on. Victoria gestured to me. "I need my son," she said. "Bennett, please come to the stage." Bennett walked up the steps, his chest puffed out. He stood next to Victoria, looking out at the crowd with a mixture of solemnity and triumph. He looked like a king waiting for his crown. Victoria came down and wheeled me up the ramp. The spotlight hit us blindingly bright. I squinted, shielding my eyes with a shaking hand. I looked frail. I looked pathetic. Perfect. Victoria handed a leather-bound folder to Bennett. "Your father wishes for you to read this," she said. Bennett took the folder. His hands were trembling slightly, not from grief, but from greed. He opened it. He scanned the first page. I saw his eyes widen as he took in the numbers. The offshore accounts, the real estate portfolio, the fleet. He had known I was rich, but he hadn't known I was this rich. The realization hit him like a physical blow. He was looking at more money than he could spend in 10 lifetimes. "Read it." I wheezed into the microphone, my voice amplified into a ghostly rattle. "Read it to them, Bennett." Bennett cleared his throat. He leaned into the mic, his voice booming, confident. "I, Atticus Thorne, being of sound mind and body, hereby declare this to be my last will and testament." He paused for effect. He looked at Serena, who was clutching her purse so hard, her knuckles were white. "I hereby revoke all prior wills and codicils. I direct that my debts be paid and that my funeral expenses be handled by my estate." He flipped the page. This was it, the money shot. "I give, devise, and bequeath my entire estate, including all liquid assets, real estate holdings, stocks, bonds, and the controlling interest in Thorne Logistics." He stopped. He looked at the crowd. He looked at Vane. He smiled. A smile of pure, unadulterated victory. "To my beloved son, Bennett Thorne." The room erupted. Gasps, whispers, applause from the sycophants who wanted to be on the new emperor's good side. Bennett soaked it in. He closed his eyes for a second, savoring the moment. He had done it. He had beaten the clock. He had beaten me. He was rich. He was safe. But he hadn't finished reading. "Keep going," I whispered. My voice cut through the applause like a knife. Bennett opened his eyes. He looked down at me, confusion flickering across his face. "What? Read the rest?" I said, my hand gripping the armrest of the wheelchair. "The condition. Read the condition, Bennett." Bennett looked back at the document. He frowned. He hadn't seen this part before, or maybe in his excitement he had skipped it. He read it silently, his lips moving. On the condition that he accepts and wears my most personal possession as a symbol of the burden of leadership. He relaxed. He smiled again. He thought it was a ceremonial gesture. A ring. A medal. A pin. Something easy. Something symbolic. He looked up at the crowd, his confidence restored. Subject to the condition, he read aloud, his voice smooth, that I accept, and wear his most personal possession as a symbol of the burden of leadership. He looked down at me beaming, the devoted son indulging his dying father's final eccentric wish. I accept, Dad, he said, his voice thick with fake emotion. Of course I accept. Anything to honor you, anything to carry your legacy forward. The crowd applauded again, softly, respectfully. It was a beautiful moment, a touching passing of the torch. I slowly, tragically lifted my left arm. The movement was heavy, as if my arm were made of lead. I pulled back the sleeve of my oversized jacket. The watch glinted in the harsh spotlight. It was a simple thing. Gold band. Crystal face. Elegant. Timeless. To the audience, it looked like a generous parting gift. A Patek Philippe worth a small fortune. But Bennett knew. I unclasped it with trembling fingers. I held it out to him, the metal catching the light. Then take this, I whispered into the microphone. The watch you gave me, Bennett. I want you to have it back. I want you to wear it. Bennett froze. His smile didn't just fade, it shattered. His face went from flushed triumph to the color of old milk in a split second. His eyes locked onto the watch dangling from my hand. He stared at it as if I were holding a live cobra. He knew what was inside. He knew about the industrial isotope. He knew about the radiation that had been cooking my flesh for a week. He knew that watch was a death sentence. The silence in the room changed. It went from respectful to confused. Why wasn't he taking it? Why was he backing away? Take it, son, I said, my voice getting a little stronger, a little less raspy. Put it on. If you want the money, you have to wear the watch. Bennett took a step back, his expensive shoes scraping against the stage floor. He looked at the watch, then at me, then at the audience. He looked trapped. No, he stammered, his voice cracking. I can't. It was a gift. For you. You should be buried with it. I don't want to be buried with it, I said, pushing myself up in the wheelchair. I want you to have it. I want you to feel the weight of time, Bennett. The time you gave me. I stood up. The blanket fell from my legs, pooling on the floor. I stood straight, my spine uncurling. I wasn't the hunched, dying man anymore. I was tall. I was imposing. The makeup made me look dead, but my eyes were burning with life. The crowd gasped, a collective intake of breath, the miracle recovery, or something else. Put it on. I commanded, my voice booming without the need for the microphone. Bennett backed away until he hit the podium. He looked around wildly. He looked at Silas Vane. The butcher was standing up now, frowning, his hand moving inside his jacket. He sensed the shift. He knew a hustle when he saw one. Bennett looked at Serena. She was standing by the stage, her hand over her mouth, her eyes wide with terror. She knew too. It is broken. Bennett lied, desperation seeping into his tone. Look at the face, Dad. It is cracked. I will get it fixed for you first. Then I will wear it. It isn't broken, I said, stepping toward him. I held the watch out like a weapon. It is ticking, Bennett. Can't you hear it? It is ticking just like your debt. I was 3 feet away from him. I could smell his sweat. It smelled sour. It smelled like fear. Why are you afraid, son? I shouted, turning to the crowd, holding the watch up high. Why won't my son take his inheritance? Is there something wrong with it? Is there something inside it? Bennett was shaking his head violently, his hands held up in front of him. Dad, stop! Please, not here! Right here, I roared. You wanted a show, Bennett. You wanted the world to see you take everything, so take it! I threw the watch. It sailed through the air, a gold arc under the spotlight. It landed at Bennett's feet with a heavy metallic clack. The crystal shattered completely. Bennett scrambled back, tripping over his own feet, falling onto his backside. He crab-walked away from the watch as if it were a grenade about to detonate. Don't touch it! He screamed, his voice high and shrill. Don't touch it! The room was dead silent. 200 people watched a grown man cower from a wristwatch. I signaled to the sound booth. O'Malley was ready. Now! The massive screen behind us, which had been displaying a polite photo of the Thorn Company logo, flickered. It changed. It wasn't a tribute video. It was a recording. A grainy, high-definition video of a workbench. A pair of gloved hands holding the Patek Philippe. O'Malley's voice filled the ballroom, narrated with clinical precision. Subject: Patek Philippe wristwatch. Modification detected. On the screen, the hands opened the back of the watch case. The crowd leaned in. The sound of a Geiger counter blasted through the speakers. A rapid, terrifying static. Click, 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 click. It sounded like gunfire. It sounded like death. The crowd screamed. People covered their ears. On the screen, O'Malley used tongs to lift out a small silver capsule from the watch mechanism. This is Cobalt-60. O'Malley's voice boomed. An industrial radioactive isotope. Enough radiation to kill a human being in 14 days of direct contact. It was hidden inside the watch Bennett Thorne gave his father for his 70th birthday. The video froze on the image of the capsule. The Geiger counter noise continued a relentless, accusing rhythm. I stood over my son, looking down at him. He was curled in a ball on the stage floor, sobbing. You tried to cook me from the inside out, I said, my voice low and terrible. You mortgaged my life to a butcher, and when you couldn't pay, you tried to murder me with a birthday present. Bennett looked up. He looked at the screen. He looked at me. Then he looked past me into the darkness of the ballroom. He looked for Vane. But Vane wasn't looking at him. Vane was looking at the exit, calculating. Bennett scrambled to his feet. He didn't run to me. He didn't run to Serena. He ran toward the side door. But the doors didn't open. They were blocked. Not by hotel security. By the police. And standing right in front of them, holding the hand of a grim-faced social worker, was a small boy in pajamas. Leo. My grandson stepped into the light. He pointed a shaking finger at his father. He locked me in the dark! Leo screamed, his voice breaking the final seal on Bennett's fate. He said Grandpa had to die so we could pay the bad men. He stole my toys. Bennett fell to his knees. The party was over. The funeral had begun. But the body in the casket wasn't mine. It was his. The ballroom was silent, a heavy, suffocating silence that pressed against my eardrums. My arm was still extended, the gold band of the Patek Philippe dangling from my fingers like a pendulum. It caught the light of the crystal chandeliers, spinning slowly, innocent and beautiful. But to Bennett, it looked like a viper coiled to strike. I watched the blood drain from his face. It didn't just fade, it vanished, leaving him the color of wet ash. His eyes were wide, fixed on the watch, his pupils dilated in pure, primal terror. He wasn't looking at a gift. He was looking at his own death warrant. Take it, son, I whispered into the microphone, my voice scraping against the silence. It is yours. You earned it. Bennett took a step back. His expensive Italian loafers scuffed against the hardwood stage. He looked at the watch, then at me, then at the audience. He was trapped. If he took it, he was exposing himself to the same poison he had used on me. If he refused it, he was rejecting the inheritance he had killed for. He was a rat in a maze, and I had just blocked the exit. "No," he stammered, his voice cracking, high and thin. I can't." "Why not?" I asked, leaning forward in the wheelchair. "It is a family heirloom now. It signifies the transfer of power." "Don't you want the power, Bennett? Don't you want the empire?" I saw beads of sweat pop out on his forehead, glistening under the stage lights. He licked his lips. He looked desperate. He looked toward the front row, searching for Silas Vane, searching for an exit strategy. But Vane was just watching, his face a mask of stone. Vane knew. He smelled the fear. It belongs to you, Dad," Bennett lied, forcing a smile that looked like a rictus of pain. "You should be buried with it. It was my gift to you. It wouldn't be right." "I don't want to be buried with it, Bennett," I said, my voice hardening. "I want you to wear it. I want you to feel the weight of time, just like I did." I thrust the watch toward him. He flinched. He physically recoiled, throwing his hands up as if to ward off a blow. "Get it away from me!" he shrieked. The crowd gasped. A ripple of confusion went through the room. They saw a grieving son, terrified of a wristwatch. They didn't understand. Not yet. I laughed. It was a dry, dark sound. "What is the matter, Bennett?" I asked. "Are you afraid of it? Is there something wrong with this watch?" "It is broken," he yelled, desperation seeping into every syllable. "It is broken, Dad. Let me fix it. Let me take it to the shop." "It isn't broken," I said. "It is ticking perfectly. Can't you hear it?" I reached down and gripped the armrests of the wheelchair. The makeup on my face made me look like a corpse, but the muscles underneath were coiled tight. I pushed. "Atticus, what are you doing?" Victoria whispered behind me, feigning concern for the audience. "I am standing up," I said. I pushed harder. The blanket covering my legs slid to the floor. I rose, and slowly at first, trembling for effect, and then I straightened my spine. I locked my knees. I rolled my shoulders back. I wasn't the hunched, dying old man anymore. I was 6 feet of anger. I was the man who had crushed unions and built fleets. I towered over the podium. The gasp from the audience was louder this time, a collective intake of breath, the miracle recovery, or something far more sinister. I took a step toward Bennett. He stumbled back, hitting the microphone stand. It screeched, a piercing sound of feedback that made everyone wince. "Why won't you touch it?" I roared, my voice booming without the mic, filling the cavernous ballroom. "Are you afraid of the gold, or are you afraid of what you hid inside the case?" Bennett was shaking his head, his hands trembling violently. "Dad, stop. You are sick. You are delirious. Sit down." "I am not sick," I shouted, ripping open the collar of my shirt. I tore the fabric, buttons flying across the stage. I exposed my chest, showing the sweat, showing the power, showing them I was very much alive. I was sick, Bennett. I was sick because you poisoned me. Bennett looked like he was going to vomit. He looked at Serena. She was frozen, her hands over her mouth, tears of terror streaming down her face. She knew the game was up. "You tried to cook me from the inside out," I yelled, holding the watch up like a holy relic. "You put an industrial isotope inside a birthday present, and you waited for me to rot. Liar!" Bennett screamed, his voice hysterical. "He is lying. He has dementia. Someone get a doctor. I didn't need a doctor. I needed a technician." I raised my hand and snapped my fingers. "Now!" I commanded. The lights in the ballroom cut out completely. Darkness swallowed the room. For 3 seconds, there was only the sound of nervous breathing and the rustle of expensive fabric. Then, the massive screen behind the stage exploded into life. It was blindingly bright. It wasn't a tribute video. It wasn't a montage of my life. It was a high-definition recording of a workbench. The camera was focused on a pair of gloved hands holding the Patek Philippe. The timestamp in the corner read 3 days ago. A voice narrated over the video. Clinical. Cold. Precise. It was O'Malley. Subject: Patek Philippe wristwatch. Serial number 4492. External condition: pristine. On the screen, the gloved hands used a specialized tool to unscrew the case back. The image was magnified, showing every scratch, every detail. The crowd watched, mesmerized. Internal analysis initiated, O'Malley's voice said. The hands lifted the back plate. Inside there was no balance spring. There were no gears. There was a small, lead-lined cavity containing a silver capsule the size of a pill. And then came the sound. O'Malley brought a yellow device into the frame. A Geiger counter. Crack. 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 Click, 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 click. The sound ripped through the ballroom speakers. It was a terrifying, static roar. The sound of invisible death. It sounded like a machine gun firing in a tunnel. It was the sound of radiation. The audience screamed. People in the front row covered their ears and scrambled back, knocking over chairs. They didn't know if the video was live. They didn't know if they were being exposed. Panic rippled through the room. On the screen, the needle on the Geiger counter buried itself in the red zone. Reading confirms presence of cobalt-60. O'Malley's voice boomed over the static. High-activity industrial source. Lethal dosage estimated within 14 days of direct contact. The shielding has been deliberately filed down to direct the beam outward, into the wearer's wrist. The video froze on the image of the silver capsule. The static noise continued, a relentless, accusing rhythm. I stood on the stage, bathed in the light of the screen. I looked down at Bennett. He was on his knees, his hands over his ears, trying to block out the sound of his own crime. "You didn't give me time, Bennett," I said, my voice low and terrible, cutting through the panic in the room. "You gave me a nuclear reactor." I threw the watch. It hit the floor inches from his knees. The crystal shattered. The back popped open. The empty case skittered across the stage. Bennett scrambled backward, crab walking away from the broken watch as if it were a grenade. "Don't touch it!" he screamed, his voice shredding his throat. "Don't touch it! It burns!" The room fell silent again. 200 of the city's most powerful people watched a grown man cower in terror from a wristwatch. His scream was a confession. It was the final nail in his coffin. I looked out at the crowd. I looked at Silas Vane. The butcher was standing now. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at Bennett. And for the first time all night, Vane smiled. It was a smile that promised pain. "You wanted the inheritance, Bennett," I said, straightening my jacket. "You wanted the legacy. Well, here it is. You are the man who tried to nuke his father." I signaled to Victoria. "Bring him out." From the side of the stage, the heavy curtain pulled back. 2 police officers stepped out. But they weren't leading Bennett away. Not yet. They were escorting a small, trembling boy in pajamas. Leo. My grandson walked into the spotlight, clutching the hand of a grim-faced social worker. He looked at the crowd, blinking. Then he saw me. He saw I was standing. He saw I was strong. "Grandpa!" he cried. I knelt down on the edge of the stage. "Tell them, Leo," I said gently. "Tell them what your father did." Leo pointed a shaking finger at the man cowering on the floor. He locked me in the dark, Leo screamed, his voice breaking the hearts of every mother in the room. He stole my toys. He said Grandpa had to die so we could pay the bad men. Bennett collapsed. His face hit the floor. He knew it was over. The party was finished. The funeral had begun. But the body they were going to bury wasn't mine. Liar. You are a senile old liar. Bennett screamed the words tearing from his throat like jagged glass. He scrambled to his feet, his face purple with a rage that had finally snapped the last tether of his sanity. He pointed a shaking finger at me at Leo at the screen that was still displaying the radioactive heart of the watch. This is a setup. My father has dementia. He is hallucinating. He brainwashed the boy. Look at him. He is wearing theatrical makeup. He is staging this to humiliate me because he is jealous. He is jealous that I am the future and he is the past. The crowd didn't buy it. I could see the disgust rippling through the room. They had seen the video. They had heard the Geiger counter. They had heard the child's testimony. But Bennett wasn't looking at the crowd anymore. He was looking at me. And in his eyes I saw the final desperate calculation of a cornered animal. If he couldn't discredit me, he had to silence me. I am going to kill you yourself, you old bastard. He lunged. He didn't run like a man. He charged like a bullhead, lowered fists clenched, a guttural roar erupting from his chest. He cleared the distance between the floor and the stage in 2 strides. He vaulted onto the platform. He was coming for my throat. I didn't move. I didn't flinch. I stood my ground, the cane in my hand feeling heavy and solid. I was ready to swing it. I was ready to crack his skull if I had to. But I didn't need to. Bennett never reached me. Before his foot could plant for the final strike, a blurred shape stepped out from the shadows of the wings. It was Victoria Graves. She didn't look like a lawyer in that moment. She looked like a riot shield in a silk blouse. She stepped directly into Bennett's path. Beside her stood Chief Miller, the head of the city police department in full uniform. "Sit down, Bennett," Victoria said. Her voice wasn't a scream. It was a command. It was the voice that had crushed unions and broken mergers. It was colder than the liquid nitrogen Bennett had tried to use on my heart. Bennett skidded to a halt, chests heaving inches from Victoria's face. He looked at the chief. He looked at the handcuffs on Miller's belt. The reality of his physical impotence crashed into him. He couldn't fight the police. Not here. Not with 200 witnesses. You planned this. Bennett spat spittle flying onto Victoria's cheek. You helped him frame me. You are going to lose your license. I will sue you into the ground. You won't be suing anyone, Bennett, Victoria said calmly, wiping her cheek with a slow, deliberate motion. You will be too busy fighting for your life in federal court. And just so we are clear, this isn't a frame job. This is an autopsy of your character. She pulled a small digital remote from her pocket. She pointed it at the sound booth. Play it. The screen behind us went black. The image of the watch vanished. In its place, a waveform appeared, a visual representation of sound. Audio. The speakers crackled, and then a voice filled the ballroom. It wasn't O'Malley's voice. It wasn't mine. It was Bennett's. Tougher, stronger, faster. The audio was crisp. It was high definition. It sounded like he was standing right next to every person in the room. Increase the dose, Doctor, Bennett's recorded voice said. The tone was impatient, transactional. I don't care about the side effects. I don't care if he is in pain. A gasp went through the room. It was the conversation from the hospital. The conversation I had heard through the fog of morphine. But Bennett, his heart is already weak. A second voice replied. Dr. Kincaid, if we push the beta blockers with the morphine, we risk cardiac arrest. That is the point, isn't it? Bennett's voice sneered. I need him gone. I need him dead before the 25th. Do you understand? The 25th is the deadline. If he is still breathing on the 26th, we are all dead." The recording stopped. The silence that followed was absolute. It was heavy enough to crush bones. Bennett stood frozen on the stage. His mouth was open, but no sound came out. The audio had stripped him naked. It wasn't just proof of attempted murder. It was proof of premeditation. It was proof of the deadline. It connected him to the debt. It connected him to the motive. Chief Miller stepped forward. He unhooked the handcuffs from his belt. The metal clicked ominously. "Bennett Thorne, you are under arrest for the attempted murder of Atticus Thorne, for conspiracy to commit insurance fraud, and for child endangerment." Bennett stumbled back. He looked at the handcuffs. He looked at the crowd. He looked for an ally. He looked for Serena. Serena. He spun around, scanning the room frantically. "Serena, tell them. Tell them we didn't mean it. Tell them it was palliative care." But Serena wasn't by the stage anymore. She was moving. She was halfway to the side exit, her diamond dress shimmering as she practically ran through the tables, knocking over glasses and pushing guests out of her way. She wasn't looking at Bennett. She wasn't looking at me. She was looking at the exit sign. She was running for her life. She reached the double doors. She pushed the crash bar. The doors flew open, but she didn't step out into the night. She stepped back into the room. A man was standing in the doorway. He was wearing an orange prison jumpsuit, his hands cuffed in front of him, flanked by 2 federal agents. He looked tired. He looked beaten. But when he saw Serena, his eyes lit up with a dark, twisted amusement. "Going somewhere, sis." Serena stopped dead. She let out a small, strangled sound, like a bird hitting a window. Dante Moretti, her brother, the fence, the man who had sold them the poison. He stepped into the ballroom, the chains on his ankles rattling. The crowd parted for him, a mix of horror and fascination on their faces. "You didn't think I was going to take the fall for this alone, did you, Sarah?" Dante said, using her real name. His voice was rough gravel and smoke. "The FBI offered me a deal. 20 years or 5 if I gave them the architect." Serena shook her head, tears streaming down her face, ruining her perfect makeup. "No. Dante, please. Don't!" She set it up. Dante shouted, addressing the room, addressing the police, addressing Bennett. It was her idea. She found the isotope. She knew Bennett was weak. She knew he was desperate. She told him how to file down the shielding. She said the old man had to die slow so it looked like cancer. Liar. Serena shrieked, lunging at him, clawing at his face with her manicured nails. "You rat! You traitor!" The federal agents grabbed her. They pulled her arms behind her back. She screamed, kicking and thrashing, her diamond dress tearing. It was Bennett. She yelled, struggling against the agents. "He owes the money. He owes the butcher. I just tried to help him. I am a victim here." Bennett watched from the stage, his hands now cuffed behind his back. He watched his wife, his partner, his co-conspirator, throw him to the wolves without a second thought. The look on his face was one of pure devastation. It wasn't the handcuffs that broke him. It was the betrayal. Chief Miller shoved Bennett forward, forcing him to walk down the stairs. The agents dragged Serena toward him. They met in the center of the dance floor. Husband and wife, killer and architect, bound in iron. I stood on the stage watching them. I felt a profound hollowness in my chest. This was victory. This was justice. But it didn't feel like triumph. It felt like an amputation. I had cut off the gangrenous limb, but the phantom pain was already setting in. I looked at Leo. The social worker was holding him tight, shielding his eyes, but he was peeking through her fingers. He was watching his parents be dragged away. I walked down the stairs. My legs felt weak, but I forced them to move. I walked past Bennett. He looked up at me. His eyes were red, filled with tears. "Dad," he whispered. "Dad, please. Vane. He is going to kill me in there." I stopped. I leaned in close. I smelled the fear on him. "He won't kill you, Bennett," I said softly. "Not in prison. You are safe from him in there. That is the gift I am giving you. You are going to live a long, long time, and every day you are going to think about the watch. You are going to think about the time you stole from yourself." I straightened up. I looked at the police. "Take them away." They dragged them out. The doors closed behind them, cutting off Serena's screams. The ballroom was silent again. The show was over. The guests stood frozen, unsure of what to do. Was it over? Was there more? Then a chair scraped against the floor, a heavy, deliberate sound. Silas Vane stood up. The crowd held its breath. The butcher was moving. He walked toward the stage. He walked toward me. His bodyguards flanked him, hands inside their jackets. Chief Miller put his hand on his gun. Victoria stepped forward, but Vane didn't draw a weapon. He stopped 3 feet from me. He looked at me with those reptilian eyes. He looked at the empty space where Bennett had been. "He owes me $15 million, Atticus," Vane said, his voice a low rumble. "Plus interest." I looked him in the eye. I didn't blink. "He is insolvent, Silas. You know that. You bet on a lame horse." Vane smiled. It was a terrifying sight. The debt doesn't disappear just because the debtor is in a cage. Someone has to pay. I reached into my pocket. I pulled out a single silver coin, a quarter. I flipped it in the air. It spun, catching the light. I caught it and slapped it onto the back of my hand. "Here is my offer, Silas," I said. Vane looked at the coin. He looked at me. "A quarter." "It is a down payment," I said. "For the lesson I just taught you. Never bet against a thorn." Vane stared at me for a long, tense moment. The air crackled with violence. Then he laughed, a dry, rasping chuckle. "You are a cold bastard, Atticus. You really are." He turned around. He signaled to his men. "Keep the quarter," Vane said, walking away. "I will collect from the boy in prison. He has a lot of years to work it off. Maybe I will send him a watch." He walked out. The threat hung in the air, but I knew he wouldn't touch me. Not tonight. He respected the play. He respected the ruthlessness. I turned to Leo. I knelt down. I opened my arms. He ran to me. He buried his face in my neck, sobbing. "It is okay," I whispered, rocking him. "It is over. The bad men are gone." I looked at Victoria. She was crying silently. I looked at O'Malley, who was giving me a thumbs up from the sound booth. I picked up my grandson. He was heavy, but I didn't care. I carried him out of the ballroom, leaving the whispers and the champagne and the wreckage of my legacy behind. We walked out into the cool night air. I looked at my wrist. The skin was raw, red, and ugly. It would scar. Good. I wanted the scar. I checked the time on the empty space where the watch used to be. It was time to go home. Not to the farmhouse, to the new life. A life without poison. A life without time bombs. I put Leo in the truck. I got in. I started the engine. "Where are we going, Grandpa?" Leo asked, wiping his eyes. "We are going to find a new watch," I said. "One that only tells the truth." The click of the handcuffs was the loudest sound in the world. It wasn't a sharp click like in the movies. It was a dull, heavy ratcheting sound, metal biting into bone, a sound of finality that echoed off the vaulted ceiling of the ballroom. I stood over my son, watching the chief of police tighten the steel around Bennett's wrists. Bennett wasn't fighting anymore. The adrenaline that had driven his attack had evaporated, leaving behind a trembling, sobbing wreck of a man. He was on his knees, his tuxedo jacket torn, his expensive pants stained with the dust of the stage floor. He looked small. He looked like the child who used to cry when thunder shook the farmhouse, only now there was no father coming to comfort him. I watched the officers haul him to his feet. He stumbled his legs, refusing to hold his weight. He looked around the room, his eyes darting frantically from face to face, searching for a lifeline. He looked at the board members who were turning their backs on him. He looked at the socialites who were already typing the scandal into their phones. He looked at Serena, who was being dragged out through the side door, her screams muffled by the closing panels. And then he looked at the front row. He stopped struggling. His body went rigid as if he had been struck by lightning. His gaze locked onto table 1. Silas Vane was standing. The butcher didn't look like a man witnessing a crime scene. He looked like a man reviewing a ledger. He stood perfectly still, his massive frame blocking out the light from the sconce behind him. His bodyguards had stepped back, giving him space, giving him the floor. The silence around Vane was a physical thing, a cold vacuum that sucked the air out of the room. Bennett let out a whimper. It was a pathetic sound, a sound of pure primal realization. He remembered the date, October 25th, the deadline. He remembered the promise he had made, $50 million or his life. Vane didn't shout. He didn't make a scene. He simply lifted his hand and tapped his wrist where a watch would be. It was a slow, deliberate movement. Tick-tock. Bennett began to hyperventilate. He tried to pull away from the officers, not to escape the police, but to get away from Vane's stare. "Officer, please," Bennett begged, his voice shrill and hysterical. "You have to take me out of here. Please take me to the station. Put me in a cell." "Solitary. I want solitary confinement." The chief of police frowned, looking at Bennett with disgust. "You will go where you are processed, Thorne. Stop squirming. He doesn't understand." Bennett screamed, tears streaming down his face, mixing with the snot and the sweat. "He is going to kill me. Look at him. That man. He is going to kill me." Bennett pointed a cuffed hand at Vane. Vane smiled. It wasn't a smile of amusement. It was the smile a shark gives before it rolls its eyes back to bite. He mouthed 2 words. "See you." Bennett's knees gave out again. The officers had to hold him up by his armpits. He was dead weight, paralyzed by a terror that went beyond the fear of prison. He realized in that moment that prison wasn't a shelter. Prison was a cage, and he was going to be locked inside with the lions. Silas Vane ran the unions. He ran the docks. His reach didn't stop at the prison walls. In fact, that was where his power was absolute. Inside the correction system, Bennett wouldn't be a wealthy heir. He would be currency. He would be a debt that needed to be worked off in blood and pain for a very long time. I stepped closer. I signaled the officers to pause. They hesitated, then nodded, stepping back just an inch, giving me a moment of privacy in the middle of the chaos. I leaned in close to my son's ear. I could smell the fear on him, a sour metallic scent that masked his expensive cologne. "Bennett," I whispered. He looked at me, his eyes wide and pleading. "Dad. Dad, please. You have money. You can pay him off. You can buy the debt. Please, Dad. If you don't pay him, he will flay me alive." I looked at his face. The face I had washed when he was a baby. The face I had watched sleep. I looked for a trace of the son I loved. I looked for remorse. I looked for love. But all I found was selfishness. Even now at the end, he wasn't sorry for trying to kill me. He was only sorry he had failed. He was only sorry he was going to hurt. "I didn't kill you, Bennett," I said, my voice low and steady like the tolling of a bell. I didn't put poison in your veins. I didn't sell your son to a monster. Dad, pay him, Bennett sobbed. Just pay him. I shook my head slowly. I am not going to pay him, I said, and I am not going to kill you. That would be too easy. That would be mercy. I gripped his shoulder, my hand squeezing tight, feeling the expensive fabric of the tuxedo he had bought with my stolen money. I am going to let you live, Bennett. I am going to let you live with your choices. Every single day you wake up in that cell, you are going to remember that you had it all. You had a father who loved you. You had a son who looked up to you. You had a future. And you traded it all for a watch that didn't even tell the time. Bennett shook his head, sobbing, choking on his own breath. No, no, please. Good luck in prison with your creditors, I whispered, letting go of him as if he were burning me. I stepped back. I nodded to the chief. Get him out of my sight. No, Bennett screamed as they dragged him backward. Dad! Don't let them take me! Dad! His screams echoed through the ballroom, bouncing off the crystal and the gold tearing through the veneer of civility. The guests watched in horrified silence. They saw a man being dragged to hell, kicking and screaming. I watched him go. I watched my son disappear through the double doors, his shoes leaving skid marks on the polished floor. I watched until the doors swung shut, cutting off his voice, leaving only the ringing silence in its wake. I turned back to the room. Silas Vane was still standing there. He hadn't moved. He looked at the empty doorway, then he looked at me. He nodded. A slow, respectful nod. It was the acknowledgement of one predator to another. I had delivered the prey. I had honored the code of the street, even if I had broken the code of the father. Bennett was his now. The debt would be collected. Vane turned and walked out, his bodyguards falling in step behind him. The crowd parted for him, like the Red Sea, terrified to even brush against his suit. I stood alone on the stage. The makeup on my face felt heavy tight. The fake sickness was starting to feel real. I was exhausted. My bones ached. My heart felt like a hollow drum beating a rhythm for a life that no longer existed. I looked down at the shattered remains of the Patek Philippe on the floor. The gold case was dented, the mechanism spilled out like guts. The small silver capsule, the heart of the poison, lay in the center of the wreckage, innocent and deadly. O'Malley stepped onto the stage wearing thick protective gloves. He used long tongs to pick up the capsule, placing it back into a lead container. He sealed it with a heavy click. It is safe now, Atticus, he said quietly. The radiation is contained. Is it? I asked, looking at the spot where my son had knelt. O'Malley didn't answer. He just clapped a hand on my shoulder and led me away from the microphone. Victoria was waiting by the stairs, holding Leo's hand. My grandson was looking at me, his eyes wide and red, but dry. He had stopped crying. He had seen too much to cry. He had seen monsters, and he had seen them defeated. I walked down the stairs. I knelt in front of him, ignoring the pain in my knees. I am sorry, Leo, I said, wiping a smudge of dirt from his cheek. I am so sorry you had to see that. Leo looked at the door where his father had vanished. Is he coming back? He asked, his voice small. No, I said. He isn't coming back. Leo nodded. He didn't ask where he went. He knew. Even at 10 years old, he knew. Can we go home now? He asked. To the farm? Yes, I said, standing up and taking his hand. We can go home. I looked at Victoria. Handle the guests, I said. Handle the press. Tell them the show is over. I picked up my cane. I walked toward the exit, holding my grandson's hand tightly. I didn't look back at the ballroom. I didn't look back at the life I was leaving behind. I walked out into the cool night air, into the darkness, into the quiet. The nightmare was over, but the scars were just beginning to form. And as I walked to my truck, I realized that the heaviest thing I was carrying wasn't the cane or the grief. It was the knowledge that I had survived. I had won, and I would have to live with that victory for the rest of my life. The silence was the hardest thing to get used to. For weeks after the ballroom, I heard the phantom clicking of the Geiger counter in my sleep. Click, 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 the sound of my own cells dying. But now, 6 months later, the only sound I hear is the wind rushing through the canyon and the thundering of hooves against the earth. I stood on the porch of the new ranch house, watching the sun bleed over the Montana horizon. The air here was thin and clean. It didn't smell of iodine or hospital antiseptic. It smelled of sagebrush and freedom. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs. It hurt a little less every day. The chelation therapy had been brutal, a chemical scrubbing of my blood that left me weak and shaking for months. The doctors said I was lucky. They said I had absorbed a lethal dose but expelled the source just in time. They called it a medical miracle. I called it spite. I refused to die while my son was still breathing. I looked down at the corral. A small boy was riding a chestnut mare, his laughter carrying on the wind. Leo. He wasn't the pale, terrified child hiding in a dark closet anymore. He was tanned, strong, and loud. He rode with confidence, his hands steady on the reins. He didn't flinch at sudden noises. He didn't hoard food in his pockets anymore. He knew there would always be dinner. He knew he was safe. Victoria pulled up the long driveway in a dusty Jeep. She got out holding a thick envelope. She didn't look like the iron corporate lawyer anymore. She wore jeans and boots. She looked relaxed. "The sale of the farmhouse is final," she said, climbing the steps. "And Bennett's villa, well, the landlord repossessed it. The contents were auctioned off to pay the catering bill for the party." "Good," I said, taking the envelope. "Burn the records. I don't want anything left of that life." "What about Bennett?" she asked, her voice dropping. I looked at the envelope. It was a letter from the state penitentiary. It was unopened. I didn't need to open it. I knew what it said. Bennett was alive. Silas Vane was a man of his word. He didn't kill my son. He made him pay. Every week Bennett's commissary account was drained. Every week he was reminded that he belonged to the butcher. He was working in the laundry, scrubbing stains out of other men's clothes, thinking about the millions he almost had. "He is where he belongs," I said, tossing the letter onto the patio table. "He is living with his choices." Victoria nodded. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small velvet box. "O'Malley finished it," she said, handing it to me. "He said it was the hardest job of his life. Not the mechanics, the cleaning." I took the box. My hand didn't tremble. I opened it. Inside sat the Patek Philippe. It looked exactly the same as the day Bennett gave it to me. The gold was polished, the crystal replaced. But O'Malley had gutted it. He had removed the lead lining. He had scoured every millimeter of the casing to ensure not a single radioactive particle remained. He had installed a new movement, a beautiful, intricate Swiss heart that beat with a steady, harmless rhythm. "Why do you want it?" Atticus, Victoria asked, watching me. "It tried to kill you." I lifted the watch. It was heavy. Cold. "Because I need to remember," I said. I unbuttoned my cuff. The skin on my wrist was scarred, a patch of shiny pink tissue that would never fully heal. It was a brand, a reminder of how close I had come to letting love blind me. I strapped the watch on. It sat heavy against the scar. Tick, tick, tick. "It doesn't click anymore," I said, listening to it. "It just tells the time." Leo rode the mare up to the fence. He jumped off and ran up to the porch, his face flushed with joy. "Grandpa, did you see I got her to gallop?" "I saw, Leo," I said, ruffling his hair. "You are a natural." He looked at my wrist. He saw the watch. He froze for a second, the old fear flickering in his eyes. "Is that the bad watch?" he asked. "No, Leo," I said, kneeling down so I was eye level with him. "This is a new watch." O'Malley fixed it. He took the bad part out. "Now it is just a machine. It reminds us that we are still here." Leo touched the glass face tentatively. "It's pretty now," he whispered. "It is," I agreed. "Go wash up for dinner," I said. "I am making steaks, real ones." Leo ran inside, the screen door slamming behind him. The house filled with the noise of a child living a normal life. I stood up and looked at Victoria. "You saved him, Atticus," she said. "You saved both of you." "I didn't save us," I said, looking at the mountains. "I just woke up." I walked to the edge of the porch. I looked at the watch one last time. The second hand swept around the dial, relentless and precise. It didn't care about money. It didn't care about power. It just moved forward, eating the future 1 second at a time. Bennett had tried to steal my time. He had tried to cut it short, to cash it out like a chip at a casino. But he forgot the most important rule of the game. You can't cheat time. You can only use it. And I intended to use every second I had left. I tapped the glass face of the watch. "Time waits for no one." I whispered into the wind, my eyes fixing on the horizon, where the storm clouds were clearing. "And neither does karma." I spent 40 years building an empire, believing I was securing a legacy for my bloodline. But I learned the hardest way possible that DNA is not a contract of loyalty. Bennett proved that greed can rot a soul faster than any radiation. True wealth isn't the millions in the bank or the buildings with my name. It is the trust of the people who stand by you when the lights go out. We cannot choose who we are related to, but we must choose who we call family. Sometimes, you have to be willing to burn down the house to save the innocent child trapped inside. Peace isn't given. It is earned by making the hardest choices when the clock strikes 12. If you believe justice was served today, hit that like button and subscribe, and let me know in the comments. Would you have forgiven your son, or would you have let him face the butcher?